There is this school of thought that believes that there will be transfer of wealth from the wicked to the righteous. The idea behind this school of thought is from Solomon's writings in Proverbs chapter 13 verse 22. A good man leaveth an inheritance to his children's children, and the wealth of the sinner is laid up for the just. First and foremost, it is very important to note that this was not taught by Jesus or any of the apostles. It is not found in the apostolic writings, which is the established interpretation of the Old Testament books of the Bible. Before we examine this text of concern, it is very important that you understand some few things about the books of Proverbs. The book of Proverbs is the book of sayings, which you can say pithy sayings. It includes observations made by human interactions, observations made by experiences. The doctrine of the church cannot be built on the book of Proverbs. When we continue, you will understand why. But this is because the doctrinal weight of the book of Proverbs cannot be compared to other prophetic books of the Old Testament. Solomon gave a subtle disclaimer about this in his introductory statement in Proverbs chapter 1 verse 1 to 6. Proverbs of Solomon, the son of David, king of Israel, to know wisdom and instruction, to perceive the words of understanding, to receive the instruction of wisdom, justice and judgment and equity, to give subtlety to the simple, to the young man knowledge and discretion. A wise man will hear and will increase learning, and a man of understanding shall attain unto wise counsels, to understand a proverb and the interpretation, the words of the wise and their dark sayings. He said that this is the instruction of wisdom, justice, judgment, and equity. The word justice was translated from the Hebrew word tzedek. The word judgment was translated from the Hebrew word misfat, and misfat means justice. This is to show how things ought to be, but in the same book, he acknowledges injustice. The word equity was translated from the Hebrew word mesha, which means how things ought to be. This is conditioned upon people. In fact, the book is conditioned upon actors. So Proverbs chapter 1 lays foundation for all his sayings. So remember the disclaimer of the writer of Hebrews that it is a book that contains justice, judgment, and equity. This is just like saying if all things being equal, this will happen. So there's a condition for all those statements. But let's look at what is Proverbs. A proverb is a language, a specific language in vocabulary that expresses a general truth. A short saying, a story that expresses a general truth. This just means that several writings in the book of Proverbs can be termed counsels and instructions. This reflects how things ought to be, but it can only have its doctrinal value to the extent that the apostles taught it. Among other things, the writer of Proverbs identified injustice and bad governance. Let's go back to our text of concern. A good man leaveth an inheritance to his children's children, and the wealth of the sinner is laid up for the just. A good man in this text in the Hebrew simply means a noble man, or you can say an honest man. Solomon was not talking about a righteous man as pertaining to the faith. It was in reference to moral conduct of honesty. He said the wealth of the sinner is laid up for the just. Sinner here was translated from the Hebrew word chata, which means illegal. It was used in distinction between someone who does what is legal from someone who does what is illegal. And the word just there means an upright person. He used the phrase there laid up, which means what is left behind and not what is taken from one person to another person. What you leave behind in this context means your legacy. Having understood the key words in this text, let's rephrase the text as follows. An honest man leaves an inheritance for his children's children, and the wealth gotten illegally is left behind for an upright man. So the writer was making a distinction between someone who makes his wealth legally, whose wealth will be enjoyed by his generation even after his demise. Then on the flip side, a man who acquired his wealth illegally will have his wealth enjoyed by an upright man, which could be his child. And by this, it means that there is a possibility that the wealth could be enjoyed by another wicked person. Solomon spoke similarly concerning this matter in Proverbs 28 verse 8. He that by usury and unjust gain increaseth his substance, he shall gather it for him that will pity the poor. The poor here refers to those who do not have, or you can say the needy. The text refers to those who acquire their wealth illegally but will be collected for the needy. That is, the man who acquires his wealth illegally will eventually leave it behind upon his demise. Look at the pretext of our text of concern in verse 11. Wealth gotten by vanity shall be diminished, but he that gathereth by labor shall increase. This text is clearly stated. Those who acquire their wealth through ill means will eventually leave it for those who did nothing wrong. But to be frank, this does not always happen. We've seen generational wealth of wicked people where a wicked man will pass over to his son who is wicked, and that person will pass over to another person who is wicked. So this means that this statement is not always true. This is a probability statement that may or may not happen. Remember the disclaimer given by Solomon in his opening speech that his writings, or you can say that his sayings, are byproduct of justice, judgment, and equity. You can never experience this level of justice in an unjust society. For example, in our current society, it will be difficult for you to experience this. So proverbs are observation and not absolute truth. And if you understand that this is not an absolute truth, then you should just take it as a wise saying and not as something that will guide your life. Remember, Jesus never taught this. The apostles never taught this. And if you understand that Jesus did not teach it, the apostles did not teach it, then you should knock off the idea that the wealth of the unsaved will be transferred to the righteous person. It will not happen. I hope that this video have brought an understanding to the concept of wealth transfer from the Gentiles to the Jews, or from the unsaved to the saved. So the concept of wealth transfer from the Gentiles or the unsaved to the saved or to the Jews should now be something that you do understand. Hope this helps. See you in the next video.